current connection. So officially, welcome everyone. My name is Abear, and I am with the Home Care Association of Louisiana. Nurse Trust is an organization I've been part of since its inception. Nurse Trust came about from many of us who were alumni of the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation's Executive Nurse Fellows Program. And since we got started, we were adding a number of folks from other organizations and have started our own fellowship for emerging nurse professionals, executives. So we're very excited that you're here. This particular gathering is called Trusted Conversations. We got that started sometime back before COVID, and it essentially gave us an opportunity to bring in people who had areas of expertise, some things that all leaders need to engage in. And certainly that fits for today. We have Jeannine Acantilado and June Altaras joining us today to talk about the work that they have been doing around the area of emotional intelligence. And Jeannine will give you a deeper dive into the surveys that she's done, a lot of the data that she's gathered. And June's been working very closely with her. Jeannine started her nursing career at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia as a peds cardiac ICU nurse. She began a leadership journey leading that peds cardiac group at Children's in Los Angeles, then as director at Presbyterian in Albuquerque. And I suspect that's where she connected with Kathy Davis, who's our incoming chair. She met June while serving as the interim nursing leader at Swedish Providence, and while there received executive coaching certification from the Hudson Institute of Coaching. She's currently working as a leadership development specialist and executive coach. June Altaras has been with Multicare Health System since 2018, currently serves in the role of executive vice president, chief of quality, safety, and nursing officer. June uses her passion and experience and high reliability to lead Multicare's HRO journey towards a culture of trust and psychological safety for everyone, recognizing that organizations that are successful in developing cultures of trust significantly decrease safety events for their patients and their employees. June, we're happy to have you here.
Okay, so sorry about that. I had to figure out my technology. I'm sorry. So sorry about that. I had to figure out my technology to end the Nurse Trust meeting, and it took forever. Sorry. Okay.
No worries.
So let's go in. Okay, now when you go into digital measures, you will, can you see my screen as I walk you through it?
Not now.
Warren, can't you mute everyone from your, as the leader role?
I'm going to ask everybody to try to mute themselves. If someone knows how to mute everyone, I'm happy to do that, but I'm not seeing my that on my end at this point.
Whoever is the host should be able to mute everyone potentially.
Yeah, I'm aware of that, and I'm the host, but I'm not seeing how to do it. So
Elizabeth Gonzalez, can you please mute?
So Jeannine, I'm going to turn it over to you. Why don't you go ahead and get us started?
Great. Thank you for coming, everybody. I have a couple slides that I wanted to share just to set the context of the conversation that June and I are going to be having today. So here they are. And June and I started this journey when I met her at Swedish. I think in 2010 I started there, but in 2012 or 13 I got certified in this tool. At the time was called the EQ Profile through Learning in Actions Technologies. And I would say I was a very green coach because this was the very first thing that I got certified in and the first leaping off point for me. The assessment is designed to recognize emotional patterns in response to stress. And so we all have one. And one of the reasons why I like this tool and why June and I probably bonded over this tool was because there's no category, there's no a number or a label, or it is just you, and it's very unique to every single person. And so I've been on this journey of using this profile, and I had no idea how life-changing it was going to be for me to be probably in the presence and holding space with so many people and them sharing their journey and their leadership with me. I'm deeply honored by everybody that's on the call and everybody who took the assessment, because I've learned and grown so much. This tool is an experiential assessment where participants respond to 8 video vignettes. It doesn't ask people what they would do. It asks people how they're thinking and feeling and what they're wanting. And so it has a different slant to it, because it's not really a self-report. Like, I always do this, I never do that. It's a different way of getting at to that hidden side of you that you may not know as a pattern. The tool has been vetted for liability and validity, and there are about 30 to 35,000 leaders across disciplines and roles in the database. And so some of the overview that I'm going to tell you about, I want you to know that we're comparing the healthcare to the other people in the database. And I'm not a researcher. I would love it if I were, because I would really be able to find the statistical significance in all this data and really give you something a lot richer than what I'm going to be showing you today. But I think the trends are really important because they've guided June and I through a journey of leading nursing in a different way. The EQ profiles that we administered, 1,200 nursing leaders, physician leaders, hospital executives, nursing educators, and nursing faculty over the last 11 years. The trends used over time to promote team building, structural empowerment within the nursing teams, and shared governance. We have really connected on a regular basis, June and I, and made a lot of strategic decisions based on how we, what we were seeing in the data and how we might approach nurses. And so,
but I want to tell you that story.
analysis.
So, I mean, you
Tim,
want to
can
just
you
talk me
mute?
through it? Yeah.
Tim,
but
can you-
that's a
Excuse me,
mortgage.
Kim
I
Bursing?
wanted to go through the slide then,
Oh, yeah.
and then go through the data that it's just gonna be
Excuse
really
me,
fast. I think she's
Kim
only gonna
Bursing,
be
would you mute,
possible for
please?
tomorrow, just the different units.
Sorry
And then we're
about
gonna
this.
color code each
Jeannine.
unit and plot them on the graph. So we can see who's winning. and
Kim.
who's not.
Kim, hey,
I'm sorry.
Kim, can you mute? Thanks. Kim's wonderful. So, anyway, so the data analysis, the first 50 profiles we examined together for trends sparked contact with Brene Brown. She had a connections curriculum back then. And it was a program that she certified people in, basically related to shame and vulnerability. This was before her book, Daring Greatly, came out, and before, right around the time of her TED Talk. And we focused our work, June and I, on how shame showed up in our organization. And June, I think this is a great opportunity for you to talk a little bit about how, well, first of all, I'll tell you, when I did June's EQ profile and we were sitting across the table from one another, I told her that the owner of the company, Jan Johnson, was my master coach. And I told her, Jan Johnson said to tell you that you need to be a more vulnerable leader. And she was so gracious and so kind. She said, okay, and what does a vulnerable leader look like? And I said, I don't know. So we'll find out together, because she gave me the same advice. So June, do you want to comment in here about what you found out about your profiles and the people that you actually were leading at that time?
Sure. Thanks, Jeannine. Well, thank you everyone for being here. This has been, obviously I've been in healthcare a really long time. In my journey, I would say I've had really 3 paradigm shift moments in my lifetime. And one was working with IHI and learning about improvement science. That was transformational in my leadership career. Next was working with HPI and learning about a very different paradigm in an HRO journey. At the end of the day, moving away from the blame and shame culture of thinking that if clinicians were smart enough and prepared enough and tried hard enough, you wouldn't make errors, and just realizing all human beings there. And the consequences of that is obviously much more devastating in healthcare than if you make my coffee wrong at Starbucks. However, human beings are still going to err, period. And that became another transformational experience in my healthcare career. And the third being this. So when Jeannine, did you not hear a thing I said? Or did I just go on mute?
We can hear you.
You were
Only
muted
the
for
last
just
few
a
words.
second. Yeah, just a second.
Sometimes when I bump my desk, it goes on mute. I can't figure that out. When Jeannine said be more vulnerable, my EQ profile showed up, which is move to action. So I was really happy to do whatever that meant, and yet she didn't really know either. And in that conversation as well, she showed me this high shame in our nursing leadership group. And I was like, oh, and it was opposite of mine. So I have low access to shame. My nursing leadership team had really high access to shame. And of course, me wanting to move right to action. Well, what do we do about that? And so Jeannine, in both of my questions, said, well, I don't know, I'll find out. And so the next time Jeannine came into my office, I don't know what we met about. I think she talked to me more about being vulnerable and made some recommendations. And then our time together was over and she went to leave, and she literally had the door open, kind of one foot out of the office and one in, and said, oh, I forgot. I want you to listen to these. It'll help you become more vulnerable. It was obviously it's a long time ago, a stack of 6 CDs by Brene Brown called The Power of Vulnerability. And probably just having worked with me and having some insight into me, said, you don't have to listen to the whole thing. Just listen to the first one on your commute, because I had a commute and a second home up on Camino, so that's a drive. And I listened to one and then 2 and all 6 of those of Brene's work on the power of vulnerability, and began to gain an understanding of what it could look like to become a vulnerable leader, and that my personal responsibility to all of our teams was that I needed to take that journey seriously and embark on becoming a vulnerable leader. And what would that look like? And we weren't going to be able to address the shame of our teams without my doing that. And how did we then, beyond that, begin to address the overall shame of our nursing leaders? Understanding, again, there's no right or wrong, there's no A+, there's no C-. It just is. And understanding our relationship strategies and distressing emotions under stress can help us mitigate for those. And yet, people's high access to shame was not going to change. However, we could mitigate for it as we went about our work together. Back to you, Jeannine.
And Jeannine, you may need to come off of mute. I figured out how to mute everybody.
Okay, so thank you. I had a little technical glitch, so I fell off. So I'm going to be back on here. I'm going to show you some of the data that we discovered over a period of time, and not all of it will make sense to everybody, but I'm certainly willing to entertain questions about it. Let's see here. I'm going to make it bigger. So one of the first things I want to discuss is that we realize that the majority of the people in our database, a high percentage of people, were self-focused. And that is correlated with higher access to shame. It means that people, whenever they're viewing the world around them, they have a tendency to see it through their own lens. And therefore, when things go wrong, they have a tendency to blame themselves. The benefit or the gift we get from self-focused people are that they take a lot of responsibility for what's happening, and they really want to work hard to do what to own what is theirs to own. The challenge with that is that when things aren't going well, sometimes they own other people's distress or other people's disappointments and take it on as their own. And I think that that's sometimes how shame shows up for us. And then with the higher access to shame and sadness, I think that combination, the sadness score, really surprised us. I don't think we were expecting that. But what I found is I correlate that a little bit more with the relationship strategies on the assessment that tell me that sometimes people turn over their voice, they second guess themselves. Sometimes they give up, they disconnect too soon. They can sometimes just doubt that their voice is being honored and heard. Lower access to joy, how that shows up is that people are emotionally exhausted because sometimes they overthink, overworry. Shame is a very exhausting emotion to access. And so I also think that the low access to joy puts us more at risk for lack of resilience and energy and passion for innovation. We need a lot of joy to be in interaction with people, a lot of energy. And then the low access to anger was a little bit of a surprise, but not surprising when we look at the high self-focus, because that's where you turn your frustration toward, and self-focused people turn it inward. And so their anger might be low, that would be turning it outward. And how that shows up for us is it's really hard to get accountability, and it's really hard to have role definition. And because people always want to do the one-off, they go, oh, I understand why you didn't want to do that or why you weren't able to. So their empathy, which we're higher in empathy, sometimes means that we don't draw boundaries really well. And then we had average access to love and anxiety and fear. A large percentage of the people are highly action-oriented in their decision making, and it manifests as moving too quickly. And for the teams, it looks like being reactive as opposed to proactive. And when I say a high percentage, I'm talking probably 80% or something. It's really high. A lower reliance on feelings in making decisions, which shows up sometimes as lack of vulnerability. People won't put how they feel in the room. We're more likely to talk about what we think and what we want to do, but we don't want to talk about our feeling around it. And when we don't put feelings in the room and it's part of our decision making, it's hard for people to empathize with us if we're not willing to share it. And so, which leads me to my next bullet point. Higher empathy than the population, but lower empathy accuracy, meaning we don't read people very well under stress. And sometimes we miss the nuances of the emotions that are being put in the room. And so when we misread them, our empathy falls short. People don't feel seen and heard because we're empathizing with the wrong emotion, which is even more important why we should put our feelings in the room so people don't have to guess. And Brene Brown would tell you there is no such thing as empathy accuracy. She would tell you that you should always ask and be curious about people's feelings. Higher negative orientation. People are more likely to see change and challenging situations as difficult. And the whole 1,200 people average less than the ideal. So that has a tendency. It's also associated with risk. So it's a good thing that people see risk a little bit more tightly than other disciplines. It's also harder for us to overcome resistance. So having the balance of curiosity on the opposite end of the negative orientation would help us understand how risky things really are. And then we talked a little bit about the relationship strategies that indicate early disconnection and turning over their power and not using their voice. And so that probably was the biggest thing that June and I came together over, is how do we have an empowered nursing enterprise where people can put their voice in the room. So I'm going to turn this over to June because I think that this has been an important part of our journey.
It probably is a little bit difficult when you haven't seen this assessment and the different categories. And when Jeannine says when she's doing that overview, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Jeannine, you're not only speaking about, I think we're most of the 1,200 between my past life at Swedish and here at Multicare. However, there are others in there, and others have administered this in healthcare, and that generalization is healthcare overall compared to other industries. Is that accurate?
Yes, from our data. Yes.
Our data. Okay. So almost all those generalizations that Jeannine shared with you, I'm the opposite. So I have low access to shame. I have high love and joy. I do have the action orientation for sure. I have a balance of self and other, so I don't have that self focus. My EQ profile lines up very differently than the overall team, which many people in this phone call have been patient and struggled through probably my journey through this. I'm sure they're like, oh yeah, no kidding. I do have my sadness is right in there with everybody else's. But I think one of the things as a leader, being kind of opposite of that, perhaps, I used to have these thought bubbles. So, you know, when you're with your team and, oh, we're going to go do this, right? We're going to do bedside report. We're going to become top decile or quartile in all of NDNQI. We're going on a nursing journey to excellence. We're going to become magnet. We're going to become highly reliable. We are going to do everything within an improvement science framework. You have the gifts of all those distressing emotions showing up in every group. Now, early on in my leadership career and before Jeannine brought this to me and continues to be my mentor, I had thought bubbles about those gifts, like, oh, why does she always have to bring up the why it won't work? Why does there have to be so much what if, what if, what if, what if? Like in my brain, it's like, we'll figure it out. It'll be so fun. So this high love and joy. I'm a high collaborator too. I like interdependent work. So to me, when there's a problem, the way my initial response is, yay, we get to work together to solve a problem. Well, in my brain, I thought that had to be, isn't that great? Wouldn't everybody love that? I'm not going to punish you if you do it wrong. I'm not going to shame you if you aren't having the results as soon as someone else is. But early on, before Jeannine showed this to me, the words of someone who has high access to anxiety, the what if, the words of someone who has high access to anger, well, who's going to do what by when and where? Those kinds of responses I viewed as negative. I viewed them as barriers, like, let's just get going and we'll figure it out as we go, not recognizing that that approach was actually making my team's access to distressing emotions higher. I'm going to disappoint her. What if I do it wrong? Because I didn't know about this construct. And so I wasn't proactively mitigating for those types of distressing emotions under stress. And so we went on a journey, and I am still learning how to do that, I will say. But in the beginning, for me, I applied it to my leadership overall. So I've been a leader for a really long time, way back into the mid-'80s, and I've taken so many leadership assessment tools, Myers-Briggs, Personalysis, Strengths, you name it. I've probably taken it, and they all have aspects that are really great. I would say this is the assessment for me that I have been able to synthesize and apply most broadly. And I think at the end of the day, it's because just as in the HRO paradigm around safety and quality, that regardless of what our wishes and hopes are in healthcare, that people don't err, we are going to. And we are going to simply because we're all human. And it's the same thing with these distressing emotions. We're all human. We all have these emotions. And being able to get to that root of what might be going on for someone and understanding the gifts in each of those distressing emotions and finally being able to recognize that took me a while. And then learning to proactively mitigate it for it. So now when I send out a big communication, Jeannine has taught me, what do you need to say to help the people who have high access to anxiety? What do you need to say to people that have high access to fear? What do you need to say to people that have high access to anger, high access to shame? So we're learning to proactively mitigate for those emotions and or recognize them ahead of time. And the beauty in this is that over time, I've learned to apply it in one-on-one. So I'm learning about if my team members, it's always confidential. So my team members never have to do that. If they choose, there's an invitation to do our EQ debriefs together. And what Jeannine helps us with is, here's where the two of you are going to get into trouble with your two profiles. It also helps me understand I have more than one leader who has high access to a certain distressing emotion. However, based on their self-other and their other relationship strategies, it still looks a little different. And what I need to do to proactively mitigate for that is different. So it's helped me be a better leader, a one-up leader for my team. And then probably the best part of the whole thing is that as this work spreads at the director level and the nurse manager level, you begin to hear them approaching their leadership with their teams in the same way. And so for me, this is key and a way to get at creating those psychologically safe environments, which make our patients safer and also help our clinicians with psychologically safe environments, help our clinicians with resilience, which helps. It's not everything, but it certainly helps with burnout. And our nurses chose Kristen Swanson's theory of caring as their theorist. It also demonstrates an environment of caring when people can recognize that a lot of behavior comes from distressing emotions under stress. Jeannine?
Thank you, June. So I do want to share a leadership failure that we shared together. I think she'll remember this day. We were rolling out bedside report and we were just getting started with this, and we had a bunch of leaders in the room, and she was like, okay, here's why you would want to do bedside report. She gave this beautiful presentation and she broke us all up in groups to have planned how we were going to roll this out across the system. And we did it. And about 6 months later, after training, I don't know, thousands of people, I would think, on bedside report, she came back and she said in front of the group, we didn't get any of the data change that we were expecting. We didn't get the outcome that other organizations were saying that we would get from this. And I'm kind of wondering, are people doing bedside report? And they were all like, and so one smart manager in one of these hospitals wrote, why aren't you doing bedside report? And people listed all the reasons why they weren't doing bedside report. And they were all related to one of these emotions, these distressing emotions. And we hadn't put that into the training. We put all the checklists, what to do, why we were doing it, but we didn't really give them tools to manage the emotions they would have starting to give report in front of patients and to each other in that way. So publicly, it was a big fail. But we fixed it. But this was a perfect example of how we were like, oh my gosh, if we would have been that smart back then, we would have been able to get ahead of it and actually plan that as part of the training of how are we going to manage the distressing emotions you have from making a change like that. So, yeah, it was a telling moment for both of us. So
My first nor my last leadership failure, but that's just one of them.
so we learned from our mistakes, and it was good for both of us. People bring an orientation to their psychological safety based on early childhood experiences and historical relationships to people in positions of authority. I know I've read the Amy Edmondson stuff, and I follow her and I love her. I think her new book, The Right Kind of Wrong, addresses this a little bit better than The Fearless Organization. I really believe that that leaders can kind of lean into psychological safety by understanding that everyone is having a different emotional response to their leadership and tailoring it. And that's where the dyad debriefing and the team debriefing, where we get together in teams, we can customize leadership development based on who's in the room. We do a spreadsheet, we analyze it and decide what tools and skills and abilities they might need to really interact with one another. If you have somebody who has higher access to shame interacting with someone who has higher access to anxiety, the anxiety person wants a whole lot of context and information and why. And the shame-based person would be more likely to say, oh, you're asking me all these questions because you're not sure I know what I'm doing. And they kind of have this internal dialogue. And once we put it out on the table, it's sort of like all disappears because they realize that they don't have to honor the story in their head that they've always been telling themselves when it doesn't serve them well. The high shame cultures can be impacted by workplace incivility, bullying, unresolved conflict, certainly disengagement and emotional exhaustion, an unwillingness to put an empowered voice in the room and lack of vulnerability, decreased innovation, decreased communication that can really impact patient outcomes. Sometimes when you don't want to disagree, those hard conversations, the fear of being wrong, the fear of being judged or criticized. Some of the interventions to augment EQ that we've done, I kind of listed a few of them here, and many of the people on the call could probably talk about what worked best for them. But we do conflict competence training to help individuals see their constructive and destructive behaviors in conflict that are likely related to their internal emotional patterns. So if you're familiar with the conflict dynamic profile, which is out of Eckerd College, and it's Craig Rundy's book, Becoming Conflict Competent, we overlaid the behaviors that people know that they do with their internal emotional pattern and tried to make those connections so that they actually can see that their behavior in conflict is sometimes related to what they're telling themselves and their default emotional pattern. And an awareness of hot buttons, keeping an individual from positive interactions, which is also part of the conflict dynamic profile about raising awareness about what triggers people. The information wheel we use to develop and verbalize an empowered voice. It's been really instrumental at taking putting the emotion in, because that's part of the information wheel, but having it be less emotional, because then emotions are treated like data too, and they're important to consider. And then the team dynamics training with vulnerability exercises. I have actually gotten some of these leaders to write poetry. I'm really excited by that. Of course, I have to surprise them first and then they're willing, but I've had them singing and dancing and doing art. And those are all really big vulnerability exercises. You're not thinking that you're going to be doing at work, but they change people. They change people, they connect. And I would be surprised if anyone who's participated in that hasn't walked away with some meaningful connection with someone based on those exercises. And then we also overlay the VIA character strengths assessment to especially the top 5 things that are associated with work-life satisfaction and happiness and to augment joy. And those are zest, curiosity, love, gratitude, and hope. And we could have a whole nother discussion on the data from there. But I think curiosity is probably the thing that we work on the most, and zest is where we have the biggest opportunity in the data. Any comments about that, June?
No, I think what you're hearing is a journey, and in many ways, just like PDSA, right? That as you get a critical mass of people that have an understanding of the EQ assessment and the relationship strategies, and then we're looking at our teams, we're able to begin weaving in some of these other methodologies, because you're weaving those methodologies in based on the overall EQ profile of your team or teams. And I think that from my perspective, that is one of the reasons it's successful is a hard word to use here. However, I will say that people connect to it and engage with it. And the more that they do, the more you can begin to watch not only their leadership develop, you begin to watch their teams become less burnt out, more empowered. You start seeing that, oh, that nursing unit's always at the top of the list on XYZ. And you recognize that you have a leader who is synthesizing, applying, and then beginning to integrate all these things together for their teams. And they become not only a more high performing team, they become a team that has more resilience and experience more joy at work. You can also, when you start looking at it, you can begin to see the correlations in that with our nurses that choose to become involved in informal nursing leadership. Our shared leadership, all our different shared leadership structures. We've handed over our storytelling echoes that Jeannine and I started. That's now handed over to the staff level to run. So you see that type of engagement coming from these places where the leader has found that this works for them and applied it within how they lead their teams. And you can see those teams emerging as teams that are more autonomous and feel that they have more influence and agency and are empowered and begin contributing to our overall nursing enterprise and our journey to become strong and vibrant culture.
Jen and Jeannine, if I might jump in, Mary Kay Van Driel is our former chair. She's asking, she says she's curious about how this method of working better together actually worked during COVID, when we saw so much more workplace violence.
Yeah, June can probably speak to this a little bit better than I can in terms of being at the front lines. I do think that leaders had a higher tolerance for recognizing that people were in their hijack state and that they were actually going to their patterns. And sometimes I think verbalizing that out loud just takes all the tension out of the room when you're able to say, hey, my anxiety is speaking to me, or hey, I feel the need to have an action here. We have people who are very action oriented, and then we have people who are very methodical in the room. And sometimes those methodical people who knew what the proactive next step should be could allow those action oriented people to do one small action that would tip the apple cart, that would help them kind of out of their hijack. And then now let's be proactive about what we need to do next. And so leveraging the different profiles in the room and knowing what you could count on people for. Over time, you don't even really need the profile anymore. You get really good at recognizing this in other people, and we get better at allowing ourselves to put each other in check. And so I don't know if June would have anything to add to that about how the COVID response went.
Mary Kay, we never quite honestly did a look back and did any formal correlations there. So I can't answer it in a quantitative manner. What I can say qualitatively, it's very similar to what I just said previously. COVID was hard on everyone. It had a lot of devastating impacts. I think maybe we're beginning, I think I can feel it beginning to come out of the trauma. We certainly had a lot of trauma that people were coming out of. However, I will say that the areas where the nursing leader understood these concepts their areas tended to either recover more quickly. We have a tool that we use. It's called the SCORE survey through Safe and Reliable. It actually is the largest survey tool and valid and reliable tool for burnout and resilience. So we watch that very closely. And I can see at the department level how people's burnout and resilience is changing over time. And I can say that in this last year, we can also do a cut of nursing across the entire organization. And nursing actually this last year, year over year, had the highest improvement in burnout and resilience than any other group that we can segment by role and or any other entity. So you can make some correlations, you can see some associations, but we didn't study it for me to be able to say exactly the impact on workplace violence.
So one of the things that we did is, if you're familiar with Pacific Northwest Narratives or Interstitium, which is a storytelling thing in Seattle with it's physician led. I took June to one of those storytelling events at the Schaefer Bailey, I don't know, in October of 2022, maybe 21, something like that. And
or that, Jeannine, because we've been doing echoes. Yeah, must have been.
Maybe it was October 2021. And we decided that we were going to start a storytelling community. And so it is a formalized Echoes event, a curated storytelling show that we've done several of them now, probably 8. And Kathy Davis and I do the coaching for the people who are the tellers. And it's very much a healing experience. You'd have to experience to know what we're talking about for the tellers and for the people who are listening, and they're recorded so people can see them on our wellness and resilience site. Now the staff have pretty much taken it under Julie Rose is our program coordinator who kind of helps us with that. And it's been unbelievable. We also do a monthly journaling for emotional intelligence for leaders. And we have a facilitator who does starting your journaling practice. I think it's called something like Good Things Come to Those Who Journal. That's Amanda Stern. So we have some journaling because we know that that's an important aspect of self-reflection and self-awareness. And then we do dyad team debriefs. We talked about that. And we've also put EQ into transition to practice program training and leadership development programs. And I think that's all I have to share. Is there any questions? Anyone want to chat with us or talk to us? Or share their experience in doing this?
Many of you use Zoom regularly and you know how to put your hand up using the automated process. And we've got 4 screens, so seeing your physical hand up might be a little bit of a challenge. But if you'd like to do that, I know that many of you have worked with June and with Jeannine, so looking forward to getting some input from some of you. And then after that, Jeannine is going to get us kicked into gear in a more orchestrated discussion with the group. And Jeannine and June, if you see somebody with a hand up, please feel free to just go ahead and while we're waiting for that, I'm going to put something in the chat. We have our Nurse Trust Summit. That's going to be in Austin, Texas, April the 7th through the 9th. We managed to collaborate with the universe, and there's going to be a total solar eclipse there during our meeting. We scheduled it during the lunch break. So congratulations to the Summit Planning Committee for helping to make that happen. I see Tricia Strickland's hand up. Tricia, unmute yourself and jump in.
Yeah, hi, thank you. I'm just wondering, how do you get more in tuned into recognizing what the other people in your group need? I know you guys have gone through a lot of training, but how do I recognize who are the anxiety people or not even necessarily recognizing, but making sure that when I'm responding in emails, that I'm responding in a way that's appropriate to meet all the needs of those different groups that you talked about in terms of anxiety or whatever. Does that make sense? Like, how do you get better skilled at that?
Yep. Well, Trish, I'll tell you my experience. I'll never be as good as Jeannine. I'll never be as fast as her or as good as she is. She does have this little cheat sheet where it tells you phrases of the distressing emotions, right? What if, what if, what if? I call it the structure person. That's typically anger. The who's going to do it when, and is everyone getting their fair share of work? So she has a little cheat sheet where she gives you examples of the typical statements or questions for those distressing emotions, and that's wonderful. And in my experience, you just have to be really intentional and mindful. In the beginning, when Jeannine told me I needed to be more vulnerable, I had this little exercise that when I walked through the doorway, I would remind myself about being intentional and very mindful of listening for the gifts of those distressing emotions, because it was not by any means intuitive, or some people call it, subconsciously competent. I'm getting much better. I don't really need my cheat sheet that much anymore. I'll never be as good as Jeannine. So it's that you have to practice it. You have to be intentional to remind your brain to think that way in the next interaction. That worked for me. But she does have a little cheat sheet where you can see what often the questions that are asked or the statements that are made that often track to anger, fear, anxiety, shame.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tricia, for that question. Jennifer Collins, you're next up. Take yourself off mute.
Yeah, I just
Hi,
want to,
Jen.
hi, June. I just wanted to say thank you to both of you for being on here and sharing this work further. Like June, I would say that this changed the trajectory of my career and my life. And I have had the pleasure of working alongside Jeannine and June in an organization, and then hanging tight to Jeannine through multiple transitions in my career. And as a chief nurse now down in Oregon, I have the pleasure of bringing this to my teams here. And just to answer Tricia just a little bit more, it's really around the intentionality and presence. And I think realizing that everyone sees things their own way. And so that really has, for me, been life altering, and helping me not to just jump in to fix things right away, and sometimes just being with people. But I just want to advocate for this work and this practice, and just thank both of you very publicly for changing my life. So thank you, thank you.
Thanks, Jen. It's been fun. It's been a fun journey. You were probably number 15 or something in the profiles. There is a feelings chart, and it's by Carla McLaren. And she does have a fold out, a trifold with feelings on there, from soft feelings. When you're not very vulnerable, you use the softer words. And when you're a little bit more intense, there's an intensity score on this assessment. You'll probably use the stronger words. And I was going to put the gifts of the emotions, but I'm restricted, so I'm not able to put it in the chat. But I'll give it to Warren, and maybe he can send it to everybody that signed up. I think June, you outed me because everyone's like, what? There's a cheat sheet. So I'll be happy to share it. It's actually out of Learning in Action Technologies. They have a sheet that gives you all that information. Yeah. Any other questions? Any other thoughts, comments?
Jeannine Gitana asked to get more information on storytelling for the nursing staff. She says she's got 200 plus nurses on staff and would like to start the process for those interested. And Kathy Davis pointed out that you're going to be doing a poster presentation along with Kathy at the Nurse Trust Summit. and I put the information on that in the chat. So you can come and get more information, Jitana, and you also get a chance to witness the total solar eclipse. The last one for North America for the next 20 years, I believe.
The team's also been invited to do a podium presentation about our storytelling at AONL, Warren. Yes, we love it. I don't have the words for it. You have to experience it. It is not only healing for the person telling the story, it's healing for many in the room. And my one nugget of advice, if you decide to go on this journey, is to assure that you have people that can coach your nurses to tell their story, because we start like this, oh, the patient was crouching and I hung Levofed and then I hung Neo, and that's where we start. And Kathy and Jeannine have been integral into these stories, really getting at what was that experience for the nurse and why are they telling that story? What's the trauma in there? What's the lesson learned? And they end up being these beautiful stories. So we're happy to help anyone with this, but that's the one piece of advice I'd give everyone, is to make sure you have people who can help coach the speakers to get at the feelings and things that will help them on their healing journey.
So should we break out into breakout sessions? I think there's a lot of rich discussion that can happen, especially there's just so many great minds in the room. I also, a couple people have said in the chat that they're interested in the assessment. I would love it if the coaches who are on the call, who are certified in the tool, if you'd put your names in there and maybe an email address, if you're willing to do debriefs with people, because I think it's really, I do believe in the tool and how rich it is. And I think that there's quite a number of people in healthcare who are certified to administer the tool. So there's definitely more than me doing this work. And so, and I one day would love to get all those people in the room who've done it in healthcare and see if their data matches up to mine. So are we ready to go in breakout sessions?
We are. I put in the chat that we have some discussion questions down below, but in the chat, just a few things to keep in mind. You know, speak from the heart. There's a bit of vulnerability involved in this exercise. Listen from the heart. Be lean of speech. We've got a few folks in here, and you want to make sure that each of the participants has an opportunity to speak. And you want to be spontaneous. When we have someone else that's sharing, if we're listening intently, we shouldn't be thinking about what we're going to say. We should be listening to what they're saying. So take the time to do that. And then below those things I put in the chat, the discussion questions. How do shame and sadness impact you in the workplace? And since we and our colleagues all experience these emotions, how does shame and sadness impact us as leaders in health systems, in the care delivery work, in academia, and public health? And you can read the others there. So I would encourage you, as we break out, for you each to take a little time to get to know one another, because 30 minutes gives us time for that. We will have a clock up that'll give you a little bit of an idea of when we're getting to the 30-minute time span. So, you know, look forward to all of you having an opportunity to get to know one another and deepen relationships. So look forward to hearing back from you. So we'll go to the breakout rooms here in a minute. And we'll have 24 breakout rooms because we got 72 people in the room. If somebody joins you late, just kindly welcome them and make them feel like they're part of the group. And off we go.
So if we're still here, does that mean we haven't been assigned?
Hi, Jackie, Warren Abear. Good to see
I
you.
weren't.
Yeah, I'm not sure why you are still here, but let me see if there's something I can figure out how to do. This is my first time handling this back end, and it's supposed to be an automated process. So let me see what I can do to get you guys into a room. I see one with um, room 21. Let me see if I can assign you. Again, forgive me, this is my first experience with this. Thank you for your patience. I'm not seeing how to assign you to the room, Jackie. And not sure why this didn't. I see.
It says you're inviting me to room 14. Now it says
All
join.
right. Good, thank you. Kim and Golda, have you got rooms that you're going to? Kim Bursing and Golda?
Oh, I'm so glad to see you here, Karen. So I did it right.
Yay, we both made it back.
Yay for little things.
Warren, I have to hop to another meeting. Is there anything we do between now and maybe when we connect again? You're muted.
I put automatic mute on and it automatically muted me too. My wife would love to have that sort of a button for me. But Karen, all we're going to be doing is just wrapping up. But thank you for being with us. And if you need anything, just reach back out to us. Karen, where are you geographically and who are you with?
I'm with Multicare Yakima Memorial, so I'm in the center of Washington.
Great. Very good. Well, we're glad you've been here. We know that Multicare's got some pretty extraordinary things going on in this work. Thank you
Pretty
for
cool stuff. Thanks, guys.
Yes. So we'll be closing all of the rooms in just a couple minutes. Usually there's a clock, and I didn't see a clock. So our coaches helped me with a few things, but obviously I've got a list of some other things. I now know how to mute everybody. Since we have a smaller group here, I hope I can ask your forgiveness if I raised my voice earlier. I thought, gee, if I talk louder, maybe the person that's not muted will hear me. But
Warren, I was in the same room as Karen. So we have left our room and we'll wait before you adjourn us or whatever the next steps are.
Jackie, thank you. And that's a beautiful smile you have.
Well, thank you.
And hearing your laughter at my speaking loud was appreciated. Thank you.
Sorry, I probably should keep myself on mute and not let people know when I'm enjoying it.
I needed to hear that laugh, so thank you very much.
Thanks.
Yeah, Marie was already telling me that Marie is a dear friend, and she was saying, "Oh, don't blame yourself." That's anyway. So I hope you had some good conversations, everyone. I'm going to go to the breakout rooms and close all the rooms. So they'll be back in 60 seconds. Jeannine, we're down to 19 participants.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that came to my attention was I didn't speak to the heart math, the heart rate variability training. You know, the tool actually tells us when people are stressed or at risk for distressing emotions. And so we have piloted a heart rate variability sensor, and it's fascinating. June and I have been trying to work on our own heart rate variability. I tested mine this morning, and let's just say prior to this trusted conversation, I wasn't in coherence. I averaged about 6.7 and I was 1.9 this morning. So I guess I didn't feel prepared. So yeah, so it's a way of developing that that mindfulness. It's really a fascinating tool that kind of all comes together, and you can actually see that in the profile.
So Jeannine, when I said we were down to 19, it looks like we were 19 in our large room. Folks are coming back from their breakouts now. I'm intrigued by the comment that you made, though, about being in coherence and being the score. So, and I'd love for you to repeat that and speak a little bit to that when we get everybody else back in the room here.
Sure.
I see there are 34 of us now. So
we were having such a fun conversation, Warren, that it
Carol,
was hard for us to break.
Carol, I hope that you'll share some of that.
It's 4:30. Do we have time?
Why don't you go ahead and share what you guys were talking about and what it meant to you, and then we'll get Jeannine back on to talk about coherence and scores and that sort of thing. Bye, Kate.
Well, Jennifer and Deanna and I were on a call together, and we were talking about just sort of some of the challenges with nursing just in general, in terms of you know, how we could, in academia, perhaps better equip them for what they're going to see in practice, as well as just, you know, communicating where we still find it a struggle sometimes knowing the style, because we may be direct and a little more, you know, constructive, kind, but when it's received by the recipient, maybe they were having a bad day, who knows, but it comes across in another way. So no answers, but we had a great conversation about some of the challenges that are out there, and also just the turnover of nurses, and how can we better empower and equip them so that they don't want to leave after 6 months to go to the next job and the next job and the next job, and then all of a sudden they get dissatisfied and they leave nursing altogether, which is not our goal. Our goal is to keep them in nursing.
Amen. Thank you, Carol. For those of you that didn't hear me introduce Carol a little earlier, she's with Elemental Health. Carol is an RN in JD, and Carol will be joining us at the summit, our Nurse Trust Innovation Summit. And by the way, we are going to have a hackathon there. And I put that information in the chat, and I will put it in again here in just a second. Anybody else want to share what your conversation was like before we go to Jeannine and June for a wrap up?
Hey Warren, this is Katie Erickson. I can speak really quickly, and I know we're at time, so I'll try to be quick, but I've been doing this work with Jeannine for a couple years, and on the call that we were just on, I shared how as a leader, there's still so much work to do, but I've really learned how to rely on my other team members within my leadership team to kind of almost supplement where I may not always see things a certain way. So I am too very high in love and joy and lower in the fear and anxiety and sadness realm. So for me, sometimes I just don't see that. I don't see those emotions in other people, and I don't see them in myself. So it's helpful for me to rely on my team to kind of say, here's what they're feeling, or here's what we need to address. And even in high risk situations, I've learned to pull them into the conversation, because I may not always pick up on something that's risky or unsafe. So I think that's one of the biggest things I've learned is I can still keep working on it, but also relying on that team to really help sort of round me out and ground me. But yeah, great work. And I'm still a work in progress. So
Aren't we all?
Yeah.
Aren't we all?
Y'all are, Katie.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Katie, for taking the risk to share a little bit. Maybe one more if somebody else wants to share a little from your conversation, and then we'll go to Jeannine. Not seeing anybody jump in. I don't want to be too quick to close that conversation.
Tricia has her hand up.
Hi, go ahead, Tricia.
Yeah, so there were 3 of us in our group, and one person who hasn't got their EQ profile, and we just did a little bit of chatting about how this work is useful and we can apply it to our job and our experiences, like the whole fight or flight. When someone's in a code, we teach our nurses, like, you're gonna kind of go brain dead in the middle of a code the first couple of times because you're so stressed out that you're gonna have that fight or flight. And so teaching them that when we teach codes, that when you walk into the room, your coworker may seem completely like gone brain dead, so to speak, but they haven't. They just got hijacked, right? And so, like, just reminding them, have we tried this? Have we tried that? Did we reposition the airway? So just trying to get our new nurses and our nurses in general to recognize that sometimes you do get hijacked during high stress situations, and how to get each other back from that hijack. So that's one way. And then just being able to recognize when we're triggered ourselves, and knowing that more, being more aware of that will help us see when our coworkers or people come into our office. I mean, nobody comes into my office because I work from home, but when you see that in other people, when you recognize anxiety in yourself or when you've been hijacked, you can then start to recognize when someone else is having anxiety or being hijacked. So it was a fun conversation, and I really like the opportunity to just kind of hear other people's stories and perspectives. So it was kind of a fun, I wish we had more opportunity to just chat with each other about this kind of stuff.
Well, I hope we can get many of you back for our future trusted conversations. We also talked about storytelling, and I will just tell one really brief story. As a 17-year-old, had just turned 17, they kicked me out of high school after 3 years. I was an X-ray tech student at Charity Hospital in New Orleans. Late at night, a gunshot wound came in. I was part of the team doing CPR on the guy at Charity Hospital in New Orleans. He didn't make it, but they never found the bullet. So the chief of ER said, go in and take an X-ray. And the guy had died. So I went in and, to put the plate under him, I'm in the room by myself with the body. Put my hand under his neck. Okay, just turned 17, a few months older. Pick him up to put the plate under his back, and he belched in my ear. So I went to the chief surgeon of the ER and told him what happened. He just busted out laughing. He said, we've just been doing CPR on this guy for 45 minutes. There's going to be some air in there. So I think we've confirmed that he's dead. But anyway, Jeannine, you and June have talked about how important our stories are. So I thought I'd leave you with that story.
They are.
And then I'll give the two of you a chance to wrap up. You brought such an extraordinary group of people here to us today. Thank you so very much.
It's been our pleasure. I wanted to address a couple things that came up. Heart math is really, our heart math pilot came from the stress that we see and the distressing emotions. And also it speaks to Carol's comment about resilience and having enough energy to, I think it's low access to joy on the EQ profile that doesn't allow people to stick in sometimes because it's emotional, and giving them some tools. In some of the police academies, they have these heart math sensors where they train them in simulation and actually get to see them hijacked. And so I'm hoping that in nursing one day, we'll be using that tool as part of our training to teach people how to remain calm and centered in our decision making and maintain our joy and our passion for what we're doing. And so I just wanted to thank everybody for sticking it out with us. And there was so much to say and do. And somebody asked about interventions. We do a lot of interventions based on this data. We have the heart math training, we have the storytelling, we have leadership development that targets each part of the assessment and then what the data is showing us so that we customize it to whatever team's in the room. And there's just so much richness in it. And I do have to tell you, this is something that I do every single day. I manage my profile. I look at my calendar and I say, who's going to trigger me? Who's going to get me going today? Prior to doing Warren's EQ profile, I said to myself, listen, I can be overwhelming and passionate, and I know that, and I need to settle myself down and match his energy. And he was a friend of Kathy Davis's, so I just really felt like I needed to have this conversation go well. And then we were on the phone for 3 hours, and he was as passionate as I was. And I completely came unleashed. Everything that I thought I was going to hold in reserve, he met me where I was. But I did have the intention to behave myself, and until I didn't. And so it's just a work in progress all the time. June, any thoughts about the interventions and what this journey's been?
I'll just say that people may not be aware of it, but we try to weave it into everything we do. Jeannine referenced that we've woven it into our transition to practice for our new grads. We've woven it into our fellowships. You may not know we're doing it, but we do. And I'll end with this story, which happened this morning. I sit on our Cardiac Institute quality board, and we start every meeting with a safety story. And the lead cardiovascular surgeon was going to tell the story. And he started off, typical, all the clinical stuff. I was like, okay, here we go, another physician clinical story. And then he really surprised me. He said, here's the most meaningful part of the story. And he shared that the cardiac surgeon who had come to M&M began to share his feelings about doing a surgery he felt pressured into doing, but didn't think he should do it. And he started talking about his feelings, and others started talking about their feelings. And Mike, the CV surgeon that told the story, said, and pretty soon everyone started talking about feelings, not necessarily about that case, about other instances in their career. And we've woven this into our HRO journey as a way to create psychological safety for people. And at the end, Mike said, and we started our HRO journey really about 4 years ago. We began the planning 5 years ago. He said, we wouldn't have done this 5 or 6 years ago. And when you think about those distressing emotions and the impact on resilience for our clinicians, it just made my heart so happy. In fact, I started crying like, oh my gosh, the cardiovascular surgeons are starting to be vulnerable and talk about their feelings. And to have him say, we couldn't have done this 5 to 6 years ago, it can be transformational. It takes a lot of intention, a lot of mindfulness, and I will say a lot of tenacity, because it's like watching paint dry in the beginning before you, what are the results? What are the outcomes, right? You kind of have to take that leap of faith and believe in it and commit to the journey. And I have Jeannine to thank for that.
And I have you to thank for making this meaningful. And everybody who's taken the profile, we've learned so much from them. Wouldn't you agree? Yeah, it's been great.
All the time. They have, you know, it does nothing, what's it called? The lone nut. But the most important person was the first courageous follower. So people like Katie and Trish and Heather and Jen. Nothing's going to happen if people aren't courageous followers.
Well, one thing is palpable for me, even in this large group, is that you all have a pretty extraordinary connection. So it's been a gift to be part of this. Jeannine, thank you, and June for bringing us together.
Our pleasure.
Yeah, and the rest of you who are all part of the team. What I'd like to do before you leave with the few of us that we have here is just put a couple of things in the chat. The first is a gift. What gift did you receive today? And the second is a commitment. Is there something that was touched you that you're going to take with you? So look forward to seeing those things in the chat. And I'm just seeing my friend Tracy Schreiner here. Tracy, good to see you.
Warren, I wanted to mention that we talked in my breakout session. On the top of my LinkedIn page are two things that we have pretty much incorporated into our work. And one of them is an immersion exercise that allows people to be vulnerable as a new leader right out of the gate, to allow other people to know you rather than letting people guess. And the other one is a technique for gratitude that we do in workshops, or we all do together in a team meeting. And there are activities to keep emotional intelligence kind of at the forefront in our work. And sometimes people think emotional intelligence and sharing feelings is just distressing feelings, but most people have a hard time expressing their good feelings too. They say thank you, but they don't do it in a way that it actually gets caught and received. So you'll see that we have a more structured, guided way to do a gratitude text. And when we do it collectively in the room together, when you have 50 people, 100 people in a room at a leadership meeting doing it together, it's really a very moving experience. And so it's just those really small moments, creating those small moments in your leadership every day.
Great. Well, thanks so very much. You've all been great to stick around. I'm going to put in the chat again the link for registration for our summit that we're going to have near Austin, right in the middle of the total solar eclipse. And also we're going to have a hackathon there. The Sun Seal organization is going to be doing that. Society of Nurse Scientists, Innovators, Entrepreneurs, and Leaders. They'll be facilitating the hackathon. Maybe you've got a project that you've been working on with a colleague in your place, and you want to come and actually work on that together. We'll make sure you're in the same team for that hackathon if you'd like to do that. Also, go to nursetrust.org for any of you that are interested. We'd love to have you consider being part of the organization. So with that said, thanks for all of the gifts and commitments that you guys are plugging in here. I'm saving the chat. And Jeannine and June, we can't thank you two enough for
Thank you. It's our pleasure.
together today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Warren?
Yes, I'm staying on.
Yeah, any feedback for me?
Fabulous. I think the idea you had about giving them an opportunity to actually enter into the process really is what made it. And thank you for your generosity in sharing this with your list of folks. I'll go back and check the numbers, but I think this is the most we've ever had. And I think that a lot of it is because your work gives people a sense of I don't know that there's such a thing as a safe group, but your work allows people to be brave, their vulnerability.
Yep.
And I think that that's part of what we need across nursing. I really want to find a way for us to get with Kathy Davis and see what we can do to bring this in a more intentional way to Nurse Trust. Yeah,
Yeah,
really
there's so much we couldn't share in terms of the interventions and stuff. I didn't want to be overwhelming
I hear you.
and go through minutia and data because I felt like it would be too much for people. So I think it was a brief overview, and I was glad that there were some coaches on there who do it, because I didn't want people to think I was promoting myself in terms of doing this, because I think it's important work, and I'm not the only one who can do it, I guess is what I'm
It
saying.
did not come across that way at all. And you're mentioning the coaches, maybe we could plan to do something along these lines. Even if it's not part of a trusted conversation, maybe it's something else that's more intentional. And we get your coaches involved and maybe put the coaches in charge of a group. And depending on how many coaches we have, we split out the breakout groups with one of the coaches in each group.
Right.
And
Well, I was also thinking for future summits, anyone who's interested in taking the profile could take it in advance, and then we could do a pre-session just for them. And the coaches can lead a pre-session and content just to get them up and running, kind of thing.
Yeah, I like that. The opportunity for it to maybe be a pre-summit program for people that if we got enough folks interested, that would be great.
Yeah. There's a lot of things you can do with it, but I appreciate you just believing in the work and seeing
absolutely.
value in it. It really made a difference. And I really was trying to regulate myself when I met you, it's just that as soon as we started talking, it was unleashed. I was like, okay, my people.
You talked about resonance earlier, and you talked about your score, and I would love to learn more about that. But one of the things that happened that day is that for lack of a better words, our souls sort of connected that day. And
I know.
we both have a passion about what we're doing. And I'm curious about a lot of different things. One of the things that I'm most curious about is how we can enhance relationships, how we can enhance connectedness, so that we can truly be our best selves when we are with that patient and with their family. Because on a day that I'm discombobulated, and I probably shared a little bit with you before about the navigating we're doing around my wife's paranoid personality disorder. So I've really got to be aware, because if there was something that I was accused of that had no basis in reality on that particular day, and then I'm going to be in a Zoom session with someone that I'm mentoring or just picking up the phone call and connecting with a friend, I've got to be aware of what's going on here. And so the fact that you have something you can measure is just so very intriguing to me, and I look forward to learning about that.
Yeah. Well, we're connected for a reason.
Yeah.
I believe that. So thank you for everything you've done for me. I am going
Sure.
to coach our pastor or chaplain for the organization is going to tell a nursing story or a story at the Echoes. And so I would love one day to be able to put on, even if it's a virtual Echoes for people in this group, because I think
Sure.
people show up, and listen to a few stories. It would be really great.
Well, what you're doing, I think, really resonates with our group. Because if we often talk about what is the magic in Nurse Trust. My personal opinion is the magic is the relationships. It's a smaller group, and
Yeah.
we're able to have a connection that is a deeper, vulnerable connection with more people.
Mhm.
So I really think that this work really fits with
Right.
Nurse Trust and what we're trying to accomplish. So I'm looking for other ways that we might be able to kick it into gear. And I know Kathy Davis is going to be able to help us with that.
Yes. Hey, listen, can you remind me if I forget, I'm going off to another meeting. Can you remind me to send you the gifts of emotions? I'll send you that. I tried to put it in the chat and I wasn't able to. It was blocked. So I will send that to you. Maybe you
Great.
could send it out to the people who signed up.
I'll do that. Great. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Have a
Take
nice
yourself.
day.
Bye-bye.